Welcome back to the AP Euro DBQ review, and today's topic should hopefully be the finale of our series, which is the exam day, reading, writing, and analyzing your DBQ question. We're going to go over the AP exam and DBQ today, along with things to do prior to the exam, and we're going to tackle the prompt, the documents, the thesis draft and outline, and we're going to write body paragraphs and review and revise. We're going to keep some guidelines in mind while reviewing our supplemental and finally concluding our series off. So, to review, our AP Euro exam is on May 13th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You have to log in by 12:30 to ensure everything is sorted out, and it will end around 1:50 p.m. It is a modified document-based question scored out of 10 points. You've heard this already, just pause the video for specific information. So let's really get into what to do prior to the exam. So, you must complete the 2020 AP Exam Day checklist. This is very important to your success. The link should be in the description and on the College Board website, so make sure to complete it and make sure everything on there is ready so you can be set for the AP Exam Day. Make sure to log in 30 minutes prior on the day of the exam to ensure not only your device, but everything from personal information to whatever is sorted out, and you should log in via the e-ticket they send to your email. If you're unsure of what email they will send it to, be sure to check your My AP College Board account to see what email is registered on there. And since we have the luxury of taking this exam in your home space, prepare your workspace for the exam, have whatever notes you want out, and make sure to set them up for your benefit. So let's get into prompt analysis. This should take 1 to 2 minutes. So our exam has already started. We're going to analyze the prompt. This is the first thing we should do. So, as a review, we're going to go over the historical thinking skill. We're going to look at some DBQ prompt examples and some questions to keep in mind while looking at a prompt. And finally, steps to analyze the prompt that you should follow on the day of the exam. Now let's review our historical thinking skills. First is comparison, and there are 3 ways a question may be worded or discussed in a way that is the comparison thinking skill. 1-1 is describing similarities and/or differences between different historical developments or processes. Describe how Renaissance ideas were developed and maintained or changed as the Renaissance spread to Northern Europe. 1.2 Explain relevant similarities and/or differences between specific historical developments and processes. Compare the different forms of political power that developed in Europe from 1648 to 1815. And 1.3 Explain the relative historical significance of similarities and/or differences between different historical developments or processes. Explain the economic and political consequences of the rivalry between Britain and France from 1648 to 1815. If any of your questions sound like this or sound like they're asking you to do something like this, they're a comparison question. Although these prompts may sound very similar, they're nuanced in what they're asking you, but they all encapsulate the spirit of comparison, so you're comparing similarities and differences within this question. The next historical thinking skill is causation. 2.1 Describe causes and/or effects of a specific historical development or process. So describe the causes for the development of the slave trade. 2.2 Explain the relationship between causes and effect of a specific historical development or process. Explain how and why the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment challenged the existing European order and understanding of the world. And 2.3 Explain the differences between primary and secondary causes between short and long-term effects. There are 2 examples for this. Explain the national responses to Napoleon's rule in Europe, and explain the causes, events, and consequences of the French Revolution. Next up is 2.4. Explain how a relevant context influenced specific historical developments or process. Explain the factors that influenced the development of industrialization in Europe from 1815 to 1914. 2.5. Explain the relative historical significance of different causes and/or effects. Explain how Darwin's theories influenced scientific and social developments from 1815 to 1914. So these are the 5 ways a causation question may be worded and/or formatted for you. So if you notice any of these patterns, it's a causation question, and basically the question is asking you for the causes and effects of something that happened relevant to your argument. Next up, we're going to go over the continuity and change point. So 3.1 Describe patterns of continuity and/or change over time. Explain how science and other intellectual disciplines developed and changed from 1815 to 1914. 3.2. Explain patterns of continuity and or change over time. Explain the continuities and changes in the role of the Catholic Church from 1450 to 1648. And lastly, 3.3. Explain the relative historical significance of a specific historical development in relation to a larger pattern of continuity and or change. Explain how the events of the first half of the 20th century challenged existing social, cultural, and intellectual understandings. These are the three ways a continuity and change question may be asked or formatted. So if you notice any of these patterns, again, it's a continuity and change, and it's asking you to, argue your prompt with continuity and both change in your essay. Next up, let's analyze an actual prompt, and the prompt here is analyze the ways in which society's attitudes towards women persisted and changed during the Reformation in 16th and 17th century Europe. Before we really get into analyzing this, here are some questions to consider. What do you know about the development or processes established in the prompt, i.e. the Reformation in the 16th and 17th century of Europe? What are your options regarding positions to take? So this is going to be concerning whether more stuff it's changed or stayed continuous for women during this time period, and what historical reasoning process is indicated or best fits the structure of the essay you plan to write. Let's go over to the answers to these questions. So, the context or historical developments during this prompt would be the Reformations, which are the shift in religion with Protestantism, so Lutheranism and Calvinism, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. And during this time period, if you were doing some reading and studying, which you should be, we know that women's positions during this time period, especially in society, did not change much during it, but there were a few changes here and there. And this question is addressing changing continuity over time, 3.1, which is to describe patterns of continuity and or change over time. So, how did we do this? So first, when you're reading a prompt, make sure to annotate it. So circle key direction words, underline the historical development and time period, and note the concepts you will have to argue. In the prompt we noticed how it was asking us to show the changes in continuity for women's place in society during the Reformation. The historical thinking skill was very easy to identify because it was obviously changing continuity over time. So it's best to always keep that historical thinking skill in mind while writing your essay because it establishes a foundation and the rhetoric of your essay. Next, we give some thought into your thesis and context. Your prompt should leave you with something of an impression for you to write your thesis and contextualization. And if you're unsure what to write, go into your documents and then let them guide you of where you want to start your argument. Alright, let's now jump into document analysis, which should range from 8 to 10 minutes. We're going to review HIP, go over some DBQ document examples, questions to keep in mind, and the steps to analyzing a document. So let's review HIP. So, historical context is placing the source within its historical situation. Intended audience is who the document is being written to. Point of view is the author and his or her perspective on a topic. And purpose is why this document is being written. So, to really understand HIP, we're going to have to explain the point of view, purpose, and historical situation and or audience of a source, and how that impacts content, tone, interpretation, audience, and purpose. You simply cannot just identify HIP, you have to address how it impacts those 5 things. And you must go over the significance of a source's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience, including how these might limit the use of the source. So the questions to keep in mind while hipping a document are, why does the source's point of view, purpose, historical situation, audience matter? How could a historian use this source to develop an argument? You being the historian in this case. What does this source not tell you? Where are the gaps between them? And how does this tone and or audience of a source affect its value to historians? Now that we've reviewed HIP, now let's get into document analysis. So here are the 3 steps to annotating and analyzing a document. First, obviously, annotate your document. Circle things that seem important, make notes in the margin in response to your document, and whatnot. We read certain documents if you have the time and you need to understand them. Next, sort your documents. This is very important. And sort them based on your historical thinking skill. Since this question is changing continuity over time, we're going to sort our documents into a criteria for changes and a criteria for continuity. And this also depends on which historical thinking skill. So you might see one in similarity and differences and causes and effects or multiple causes. and you're sorting these documents for your benefit. So I urge you to do this because it's really helpful while writing. And make sure to keep in mind a few of these questions while reading a document. How can I use this for evidence? How can I argue with this? Can I hip this document? And can I demonstrate complex understanding with these? So keeping these questions in mind while reading your document will help you write this essay, because without that, it makes it a lot easier to, really write an essay with them. Next up, we're going to go over the document examples. So here is still relating to the main prompt we had previously. This is document 5, and the source is John Calvin, 11th Sermon on Job, 1554 through 1555. Notice the source there. Source is very important to showing us who this article is being written by and why will that matter. So we can really hip a document just with the source. So make sure to always read your source first so you know who's writing this and when it's being written. The document reads as, men are preferred to female in the human race. We know that God constitutes man as the head and give him a dignity and preeminence above that of the women. It is true that the image of God is imprinted on all, but women is still inferior to man. Here are some notes I made during the margin for this document. So while reading this document, I thought about HIP, and I thought about all the points for it. So historical context was the fact that this was written during the Reformation, especially for the Protestants, because this man is a Calvinist. And his intended audience is obviously church and religious followers of Calvinism. And P of V, if you didn't get it, he is John Calvin. So he's the father of Calvinism and is Protestant. And obviously his purpose is to convince people to practice Calvinism. Now let's go over some argumentation. I sorted this document into continuity because during this time period, it seems that women still are considered inferior to men. So this concept remains the same, i.e. continuous. And now let's go into our next document, document 3. The source is Catherine Zell, who is the wife of an Anabaptist preacher in 1527. Ever since I was 10 years old, I have been a student and a sort of church mother, much given to attending sermons. I have loved and frequented the company of learned men, and I conversed much with them. Not about dancing, masquerades, and worldly pleasures, but about the kingdom of God. So for HIP, I only identified historical context in P of V. It's written during the Reformation, and she's an Anabaptist, and they are known to have more radical, more revolutionary ideas. And I noted how she's a woman, so her perspective might be a source of authority because she is a woman, and she's the wife of an Anabaptist also. For argumentation, I sorted this document into changes because women can now talk to educated men because they too can be educated. So this concept is new, so it is a changing concept. And while thinking about that, we can also touch up on complex understanding because this prompt is changing continuity. I talked about how this document can be highlighting the changes. And the other document can be used to showcase the continuities. So we just did a complex understanding point if I wrote really effectively and well-developed argument, including the two. And if you notice, one tip I would keep in mind while doing this is, reading the documents as if you were the source because it helps you, imagine if you were that person yourself. So it's really helpful to use that to help you with hipping a document. Now let's get into thesis, draft, and outline, which should be 2 to 3 minutes. So the outline for this topic will be sorting our documents, brainstorming and outlining via your historical thinking skill, selecting 2 to 3 main points for your thesis, and writing your thesis with contextualization. So let's go over sorting documents and outlining your essay. Once you should have already sorted your documents by annotating on them and saying if they match continuities and change. It's all wholly dependent on your historical thinking skill, but we're going to stick with the continuity and change example because that's our prompt. So view your sorted documents. See how you have sorted them and notice ways to write an essay with them with the sorting you've got going on. Next, outline your essay. Using your documents, do a general outline on where your essay will be and where everything will be written. So that helps you with, so you don't have to go on a whim and just start writing, randomly. Next, select 2 to 3 main points, and these main points will be the topics of each of your body paragraphs, and it should be easy after sorting your essay and outlining it so you notice which stands out and which is easier to really write about, because when you're writing this document, you have to, make sure it's most convenient for you when you're writing because you're on a time crunch. Now, once you have your 2 to 3 main points, we're going to start writing our essay and start with our first paragraph, which is going to include our context and thesis. So that will earn us 2 points if we nail it correctly. So as a review for context, or you could watch my contextualization video, we're going to focus on 3 things. What is happening in Europe at this time? So we're going to describe a broader historical context relevant to your prompt. Remember, it's relevant to your prompt, so it can't just be talking about something that's not related to your prompt at all. It has to be specific, and it has to be well developed in 2 to 3 sentences, remember that? And it's usually written before your thesis. It leads up into it, and it alludes to your topic with historical context. Next up is thesis, which requires you to make a claim to your prompt, and you can argue with your thesis, so it can't be a factual statement. There has to be some level of disagreement to it, and it has to be backed up by 2 to 3 main points, as these main points will serve as your body paragraph topics, and your thesis must address all parts of your prompt, and it has to be a historically defensible claim. And now let's jump into writing our essay, which should amount to about 25 through 30 minutes. We're going to work at a sample body paragraph outline, some guidelines for writing a body paragraph, and evidence and analysis review. So this is our body paragraph outline. So you should have about 2 paragraphs. Each paragraph should have a topic sentence, which should discuss one of the main points from your thesis, then evidence, which should be sourced from documents, another analysis point to support your argument and explain why it's significant, evidence again, but this time analysis should be including HIP to support your argument, then outside evidence with analysis to explain its relevance, and in conclusion. And with these 2 body paragraphs, you should nail every point if you did all of the points correctly and you did the analysis very strong and your evidence makes sense. So let's now go into our writing a body paragraph. So you should start with your topic sentence, which each body paragraph should discuss one of your main points in your thesis. Your topic sentence should be a general 1 to 2 sentence statement clearly stating the main point of the topic and paragraph at hand. Next, you should follow your outline. If you wrote a strong outline outlining which documents you will use and how you will use them, writing will come much easier. Trust your writing skills during this. Next up is evidence and analysis. So each paragraph should use 2 documents and 1 evidence with strong analysis following them. And make sure to follow the rubric to ensure you gain the maximum amount of points possible. Let's jump into reviewing evidence. Make sure you explain your documents and don't just quote them. Be specific about your document, paraphrase and keyword quoted, and it must support your argument somehow. And make sure to include outside evidence, and remember, it has to be specific and it cannot be used for context. To earn a maximum of 5 points, you must use 4 documents accurately describe supporting your argument and 2 outside evidence relevant to your argument. For a longer, more expanded video on evidence, check out my evidence video on Instagram. Next up is analysis. So we have to explain the significance of HIP, and you must, when sourcing a document, you must explain why the HIP matters, not just identify it. And a complex understanding is the last point of your essay. Only aim for it if you have the time and the understanding and skill set to properly tackle it. To earn a maximum of 3 points for analysis, you must source 2 documents via HIP, and you must demonstrate complex understanding. For a more explanatory video on this, check it out on my Instagram. Next up, we're going to go into reviewing and revising your essay, which should take around 3 to 5 minutes. We're going to go over the conclusion paragraph, reviewing the rubric, and some finishing touches for your essay. So make sure to rewrite your thesis in your conclusion paragraph, not only as a safety measure, but to wrap up your essay. Keep it short and simple, and writing it in your thesis in your conclusion is helpful because you're not sure if you got your point for your thesis in your introduction. Why not do it again as a safety precaution to ensure you can really get the point on that? Next up, review your rubric and outline. Did you complete all of the points on your outline and rubric? If not, go back and add some sentences to ensure you did. And remember to review your thesis, context, evidence, and analysis to make sure they're the strongest they can be. And remember, reread the entirety of your essay. Reread and make corrections to your sentence flow and argument if need be, but do not go overboard. You do not have time to rewrite a whole paragraph. Simple grammatical errors should not matter, but really it's the content you're writing that will matter in terms of the point system. Now, here are some guidelines to keep in mind while writing your whole essay. Study your rubric. Knowing this year's rubric in and out will better help you write a stronger DBQ that will score high. Next up, quality over quantity. Keep it short and simple. No need for more complex sentences and making it longer than it has to be. Get to your point and move on. And remember to always manage your time. Watch that clock. Do not waste time on your essay. If you're struggling with something, finish it and move on. You don't have time to be stuck on one part of the paragraph, and you have to make sure that these points are differently weighted. Evidence is the most valuable point in this essay. Compare your thesis and context. You're struggling with those, just jump straight into evidence. Here are some supplementals to use. So make sure to use the past DBQ responses with scoring to see what people did right and what people did wrong. And remember to review the 2020 AP History Modified DBQ rubric in and out. You need to know this thing to ensure that you really earn all the points you can. And the 2020 AP Exam Day checklist, which is paramount to your success and even logging into your exam on the day of. So thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something new, and I help you prepare for this exam. And if you got questions, just let me know. I can help you with one-on-one help. I'm here to help you guys. And good luck, happy studying. This should be the conclusion to our AP Euro DBQ series. Let's all pass this exam. You guys got this.